Let's paint some rice fields. Here's the drawing. Let's begin painting. So first I'm using a mop brush and a mix of cobalt blue, just cobalt blue, and water. And it's a graded wash. Next I'm mixing up some phthalo blue with some yellow ochre in it, and I perhaps did too much of this and should have left more of it white. I let that dry, and now I'm going to do the background, and this is phthalo blue and something like burnt sienna or burnt umber, and then I'm using a mix now of phthalo blue and yellow ochre, and fairly intense, and being careful to paint around the buildings. And then I'm just going to spray it to keep it wet, and then I'm just going to do a bit where those trees are. And now I'm going to do the grassy banks of the rice fields using a bamboo brush now. I was using a mop, now I'm using a bamboo brush. So no messing around. Try and do nice clean strokes. And then back to my mop brush for this really big grassy bit here. And there's a bridge that I'm leaving. And then just continue with these small grassy banks around the rice fields with my bamboo brush, and just spray that to keep it wet. I've let that dry now. And now I'm doing the background. So I'm using for this the same kind of mix, phthalo blue and something like burnt umber or burnt sienna. But I want it quite subdued, not bright, because it's in the distance. And I'm using a big bamboo brush with this so I can get rough edges for foliage. And then I'm using a dark mix for shadows now, and that's phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, and I'm using just a round brush to do these shadows. So I guess I didn't really need the big bamboo brush for the foliage. Could have used a mop brush. And now I'm doing like the banks or the around the paddy fields, and I'm using a bamboo brush and hoping that it will give me a dry brush effect. So just do this very lightly. I try to get a nice dry brush edge on the bottom of those trees in the distance. And now I'm doing this, I think this is a river with trees growing around it. So I'm doing this with my bamboo brush, and again it's the same basic mix of phthalo blue and alizarin crimson maybe, and burnt sienna. And the houses, that's basically something like phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, and then the same mix as the foliage behind for these trees around the houses. I've let that dry. Now I'm using my big bamboo brush, and I'm using a mix of something like phthalo blue, yellow ochre, and I think that's mostly it. and I'm trying to get a rough edge so it really looks like trees and foliage. And then I'm using a darker mix of phthalo blue and something like burnt umber or burnt sienna for these fir trees, and I keep spraying it all to keep it wet. Now I'm doing my shadows with, once again, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and maybe a touch of burnt umber or burnt sienna. And I think I'm still using the big bamboo brush. So I'm trying to get the shading right. I didn't do a fantastic job, but not too bad. And now I'm wetting the paddy fields below the trees because I'm going to do reflections in the paddy fields. Here we go. These are probably a bit too strong, and that again is phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, but it's a bit too intense. And then I'm using a liner brush there and pure water and just doing a few lines across. And now I'm starting to do shading on these river banks. Oh, and then I'm back into doing these trees with phthalo blue and yellow ochre, and then the shadows with phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, and then back to my liner brush and a dark mix phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, burnt umber for like the trunks, and then round brush for the shadows, and I'm doing that bluey mix phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, wetting the rice fields, and then using the same mix I'm going to do the reflections. I did these too big, I'm afraid to say. And then doing the edges of the river banks, and then liner brush and pure water and a few lines across, and I keep spraying it to keep it all wet. And now I'm using a round brush and I'm using my dark green mix just to do the shadows. Oh yeah, doing some more shadows with these trees, and tissue to wipe out to make some highlights, because I should have left those areas light, but I didn't. And then making some darker areas. Leave that to dry. And now I'm finishing off shading on these river banks or shadows using a small bamboo brush, phthalo blue and something like burnt umber. And I try to do this quickly but carefully. And there we go, starting to get to the end now. Okay, I think that's that done. And then I'm working on the bridge now with my needle brush, and then doing some shadow under the bridge, and then just a few thin lines for these river banks, just where you've got a really dark bit. And then just a few tiny details, dark bits to these houses. And then dry brush using phthalo blue and yellow ochre and my small bamboo brush, and I'm just trying to indicate where the grass shoots are coming up, the rice shoots. And I think I overdid this, on some areas. Well, I basically did everything, and I'm not sure that was such a good idea. But what I tried to do next is to make some areas more intense than other areas, which I think was a good idea. At the bottom here and just there, just to create some kind of variety. And now I'm using titanium white, and again dry brush effect, and that's just to indicate touches of sparkling water in the distance where there are other rice fields, but you can hardly see them. And this is like lighting on the trees using titanium white with a touch of yellow ochre in it, because I didn't really leave any lights. It's a bit difficult to explain, but that side of the tree needed to be lighter, and so I'm just adding that now. Some people think that's cheating, but I think it's okay, and it works well. And this is a path that I'm painting now with the same mix, and then a bit more on the trees, a bit on this riverbank here, just titanium white and yellow ochre, and that's almost it. I'm doing a bit more sparkling white on these distant paddy fields, and we're just about there. Yep, there we go, finished. So that's one way of painting Japanese paddy fields. I hope you found that fun. Please have a go and just enjoy watercolor painting. Bye for now.